Kermit couldn't be with us tonight, but he wanted me to be sure to remind all of you, faithful viewers, to honor your pledges. On the nights we're taping these, we're doing an hour show. We're doing an hour taping here. In the first half, we're normally taking up reading a stack of papers every night known as Kyroots. There are one-liners, stories, and all kinds of stuff. And then people write down the page number that's flashed up on the screen over here that's being read that they would like to hear an additional comment thereupon or thereon. And then I look it over, the second part of the show, and see if there's some additional comment to be made. I say on the basis that we here in some cities, the cable station is only carrying part of it, and so that's what this is, so that you don't feel more confused than you did before you call that company that promised 3 full rooms of carpet for $199. Installation padding slightly extra. Don't be confused. So here we go, and I'll read the Kyroots out so we'll know what we're talking about. Some of them, I don't know. Some of them I think people just write down the page number as a joke. But even I see the original disclaimer each night on the show that says just because something makes you laugh is no proof that's a joke. So, who knows? And Kyroots said, one man decided that henceforth he would let, quote, his thoughts determine his words. Ellipsis, parentheses, well, at least on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest of the time, he said he's going to leave things like they are. Well, I don't know. We could all ponder it, I guess. A guy decided that he's going to let his thoughts determine his words. Now, I could be wrong, but it seemed like somewhere I have access to Kyroots, some of them that perhaps will never see the light of day, or it might be years, that someone else somewhere says that they decide to let their words determine their thoughts. Maybe I shouldn't drag that in. Probably shouldn't. But I had one more gesture I wanted to do with this one, and I didn't know what else to say about it. He's going to let his thoughts determine what he says. But the man is obviously no Johnny-come-fool lately, because he's only going to do it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The rest of the time, people, I guess he will be out there driving on the highways with the rest of us. So, those of you that like to be fearful, you can think, well, I look around me on the highways and byways of life, and I consider there are people driving along 80, 90 miles an hour, some of them drinking, some of them not letting their thoughts determine their words. It's up to you to decide which is the most fearful. Yeah, I know, it's funny. Other than this, I guess we can get crude. Well, why not? There's some people watching this in North Dakota, so I guess we can get crude. I was real sorry to hear about Lawrence. What happened? I hear they're donating his accordion to the Smithsonian. See, because there are people at Smithsonian that really believe that life is progressing and civilization is getting better. And I think they wanted to teach them a lesson. Shock them out of their artistic complacency. I was going to point out, if you take this in a certain way, that this guy says, henceforth, at least on Tuesdays and Thursdays, he's going to let his thoughts determine his speech. If we were ordinary, you could go, well, wait a minute. No, that's ridiculous. That's silly. That's sarcastic. It's a cheap joke. You're saying that some people in the world are so dumb they just open their mouth and talk and they don't really think what they're going to say. No. That's not what Kyroots nor I meant. Not some people. Yeah? Now I'm back to playing Mr. Everyman. Yeah, you're saying that there's some people in life. You're saying there's some uneducated people. Some people who just, well, they speak before they think. Some people, no, that's not true. I am guiltless. That is not what I mean. I do not mean some people. If I'm not giving enough shtick in business for the rest of you to get it, I don't mean some people. The inference being, let me put it to you another way rather than just blurt it right out. If there's anybody in our great viewing audience who can tell me what they're going to say next, we will send you that $29.95 viewer's guide and study outline of the program. No charge. Anybody who really has much business watching this for any kind of useful purpose, if you ask yourself, what am I going to say next? Kyroots and I have drugged this out so many times, go ahead and just be crude about it. Operating at any ordinary level, you have not the least idea. Well, sure you can as soon as you say it. You say, well, now I plan to say that. I guess we all look pretty stupid. I don't mean just me and you. I mean, we all do. How else can two reasonably intelligent, ordinary people, when I'm saying, I heard on TV some kind of crackpot show a guy said nobody knows what they're going to say next. Isn't that ridiculous? His buddy's sitting there drinking coffee or a martini or something, says, yeah, it is. And the first guy said, well, I thought about it, and I thought, is there validity to that? Because at first it kind of, I guess I just had a cold chill or maybe getting an earache, because I thought, that's ridiculous. There might be people in the world that just talk and know what they're going to say, but my God, I went to Harvard. I spent money on education. I think important thoughts. I only watch PBS. I just happened to see that thing on cable I was flipping through. There's no reason I saw that. The truth is, well, let me suggest it for the people at TV. If you look at it in a certain way without taking offense, even if it's not everybody, if we are just talking about some people that seem to be, that just talk, they say something without thinking about it. Let's say there are some, and you'd all agree to that. Would you say that there are many? Probably you'd agree to that. The other, even you educated people who know, who recognize the invalidity of my previous inference that it might apply to almost everybody. But would you not agree that many people? Oh, yes. All right, so let's agree that other than a few of the select, the intellectual peerage of the world, the aristocracy of braininess, other than you few, which I'm sure constitutes the vast majority of our viewing audience, other than you few, would you agree that almost everybody else, which is going to be many people in the world, seem to just operate on the basis they just talk without thinking, without knowing beforehand what they're going to say, and you would agree. Now my musical question is, who wrote the Barrel Polka? No. The musical question is, what do you think of the fact, or how do you explain the fact, if it is true that only just for a few select people throughout history, and even in contemporaneous times, there are only a few people who are not subject to just talking without thinking, without preparing, without knowing what they're going to say. If you'd agree that almost everybody else does just that, then what say ye to this? How the hell does the world run? How have we gone from caves and Hudsons and DeSotos up to today of Infinities and Acuras and high-definition television just over the horizon? How have we done that? How does the world go right now? How do people fly airplanes? How do people go get tickets How do people find their way to an airport? How does life run on the basis that almost everybody except you few people, that everybody else just opens their mouth? You just go up to somebody and say, how do you get to the airport? And the guy tells you. You think it's safe to fly in a plane like that? I heard they was having trouble with DC-10s. Do you know anything about it? It's a stranger, a guy standing there with a 5th grade education. He can't even find his way to the bathroom. He says, ha! That's a bunch of stuff. It was just, I don't know, it was a bunch of people, it was a bunch of foreigners claimed that because that DC-10 was made up there in Washington or somewhere by an American company, and it's them trying to pick on us. Don't believe it. Go fly it. You think, boy, I feel a lot better. The point is, if you do agree that most of the world, people just seem to just open their mouth and talk without knowing what they're going to say next, how do you explain the fact? Don't think about it a lot or you'll get nervous and won't go anywhere. How do you explain the fact that the world just rolls on swimmingly and things get better and better? People live longer and longer. Hobbies become more and more vivid. Life becomes more exciting. Longevity longifies. And all with most people, except you few who know who you are, most people do not let thought dictate their words. How do you explain that? And of course nobody can. And of course nobody wants to think, well, how come you can't explain that? I guess Kyroots could be accused of many things, but not over being a stand-in for Captain Obvious. Said one monarch. Those of you watching this, Kyroots uses king, since all this is metaphorical at the very least, and many times symbolic. King, oftentimes some people have written in and guessed that the king represents some kind of focal point in one's own neural system. What seems to be the temporary direction. I guess it could even be equated under crude conditions to one's individuality, one's personality. What seems to be the you inside of you that goes, I don't talk without knowing what I'm going to say. Okay, so we're back to kings, that kind of thing, just so you don't think we're actually talking about, trying to bring back royalty. I always like that. It's also subject of people worrying about, especially in Europe, we don't have the problem here, but people worry about, there's always a bunch of kings hanging around the Riviera somewhere, all the, the claimers to the throne, and every time these breakups are going on, falling out from under the grip, communism and all that all these kings are lurking about, like, if you need me, call me. and you hear about expatriates or local people worrying about, what if that son of a bitch, the grandson of that old king that we threw out when the Ottoman Empire staggered off the stage, and he's out there waiting to come in and get a hold of us. I like people worry about kings who are going to come back and take over. I shouldn't finish that. Anyway, it's like people worrying about their house is going to catch fire when they're living in an earthquake zone. It's had nothing to do with politics. It just got too off the subject. It's people worry about one thing because they're back worrying about phone calls from the dead. That one group of people worrying about, what if royalty comes back? Boy, I'm glad we're in the conditions we are now because we have a president or a prime minister. Not a damned old king. Does anybody understand that or not? All right, it's like this. Let's get to an individual level where it means something. It does? Oh. The man says, now take the king and the thing about the prime minister. The man says, by God, I'm glad that I deposed to my king. One of my kings used to be a drunk. No longer. I'm now a bona fide member of AA. I don't have to worry about a king anymore. I don't have to worry about being a drunk anymore. I'm now a reformed alcoholic. A reformed drunk. Nobody likes that? Well, I keep using that example, it's just a good one. Those of you that got any experience, all right, which would you rather live with? Back to the king, as opposed to a president, a prime minister. Which would you prefer, to live with a drunk or to live with a reformed drunk? Do you understand? In fact, the Kyroots, I suppose, also subject's a little connected. If you see, Kyroots said, one monarch said, when you're a king and your lands and your frontiers are ignorance, then everyone is your enemy. If you can get away from, of course this is kind of metaphorical if you want to look at it that way. If you're a king and you look out, and that which is your domain, right up to its very extent, which would be your lands and the frontier, you're up to where your territory stops. At that point, everyone's your enemy. Well, at least potentially. No matter if your brother-in-law is the king over here. The monarch of Greece at one time has got to look around. If he starts looking north and it gets to Macedonia, or what is now Bulgaria. At any rate, you look, when it gets to the end of your territory, no matter if it's your brother-in-law over there, he is potentially your enemy. Now take it internally. Neurally, that there you stand somewhere where it is that you think you're thinking at the ordinary level, and you look out, and you look to the horizon, you look to the frontier of what you think, whatever it is, you're thinking about politics, religion, anything. What should I do next? What do I believe in? And you look there and you reach the frontier. You reach a point that you come to a conclusion. A workable conclusion at that time. You have reached the frontier, and over that frontier, past that frontier is, no matter what you call it, is ignorance. That is, well, I don't know past that. And when it is ignorance, which it is at the ordinary level, because wherever you think to is into what you know, that's obvious. And so beyond that is the unknown. Ignorance. And at that point, everyone is your enemy. More specific. Why is it, if that made it too confusing, why are ordinary people? And they say, well, they pick some subject. What's your main interest in life? And they say, well, politics. What are you interested in? Well, I believe in a conservative kind of government, or my interest is religion. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Christian. And you take them up to the frontier of what it is. You say, well, how about beyond that? Well, I don't know much about it. Well, beyond the frontier of religion, or Christianity, by the way, you got people that believe that Jesus was some kind of fairy tale, or that the Old Testament was made up of leftovers, some fortune cookies that somebody put together over there outside of Baghdad just a couple hundred years ago, and they palmed it off as some kind of holy book. You start getting there, and what is it to ordinary people? Enemy. It is enemy territory. It has to be, because whatever you believe, if you say, all right, my answer is mathematics. Well, what's your favorite area of mathematics? I love, just simple addition. So, well, give me an example. What I love in life, what I truly love, is the fact that 2 and 2 is 4. Right, that is the limit, and of course that's accepted limit. That's the accepted reality. And if you said, well, there's something beyond 2 and 2 is 4. What do you mean? Well, there's some people who believe that 2 and 2 is not necessarily 4. Or if you want something, the closest distance, you used to hear this in grammar school or high school, closest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And now if you get into topology, it's no longer true. And if you didn't know any better, you hadn't heard it, which is the same thing as saying 2 plus 2 is 4, and someone else could say, well, there are areas in which that's not true. In other words, you have reached their frontier, and they got no choice. It's not a matter of education. That's why I keep picking out different areas as an example. They're finally going to have to say that's not true, or else their mind is going to turn into a souffle that's been overcooked. It's going to just get runny. And of course the state may say, well, it's your fault, and rather than the state, lock them up. They may come live with you, so don't do that to people. It reaches the frontier of what polarized energy says is either true, correct, proper, improper, whatever the area is. And beyond that is ignorance. And at that limit, everything beyond that is your enemy. It is the enemy to the ordinary thought. That's why people resist it. That is why, regardless of ordinary social observers believing there's something unusual or untoward going on, it is one of the bases of the secondary rancor between religions and political groups and etc. It's supposed to be. Because when you get past the point of what you know, when you get past the point of the area in which your king seems to have some knowledge, some control in your thinking, beyond that, everyone is your enemy. All ideas. He adds, by the way, under his breath, I think, this king said after he pointed out that when your lands and frontiers, when their frontiers are ignorance, then everyone is your potential enemy. And he pointed out that under such conditions, it's good to be king. Won't you work on that last part? Well, if you're a king, you're right in the center. What do all kings, the first thing they do? You want to jump back and forth from metaphorical to physical. What's the first thing that kings do? I'm talking about the first thing. You know what it is. They build a real big castle, real high walls, and they put their room right in the center of it. They surround themselves by every in-law that they can get their hands on, every mercenary, and they get right in the middle. And they look real brave. They look like, I don't take any crap off anybody. They get a court painter to paint them looking like, I don't take no crap. But they have it painted in the middle of this huge castle, him right in the middle, in a little room in the basement, surrounded by hundreds and thousands of troops. It's good to be king. Hundreds and thousands, well, that's an exaggeration, you don't need it. Scores of opinions, beliefs, damn near certainties. Yes, I'm protected. I'm sane. I may be stupid, but I'm sane. I may not know what I'm doing, but I know what I'm doing. Because I'm king. You begin to look a little runny around the edges to me. You've been acting weird lately. You begin to lose your grip. Are you serious? Sometimes I wonder, really, can you tell? Do I look that way? Are you putting me on? That's why the king should stay right there in the center. And people, anybody ever watches this and gets disturbed, you shouldn't watch it. Checking the clock, folks. Either that or I should admit it. There's somebody down here coaching me. I have to look down to see what to say next. From a rebel's view, said Kyroots, an intellectual, imitative, or reactionary life is the demi-mode of a tiresome vampire. We're back to the area of originality. We're back to being on the phone with, hello, may I help you? I'm dead. It is the continuity of ordinary thought. It is people relying upon that which has already been thought. And it doesn't have to be 5,000 years ago in Greece. It can be yesterday. It could be this afternoon that you heard a political figure. You heard the president. You heard the Pope. You heard somebody say something that struck you. Somebody describes, well, I'll tell you what's the cause of the current social unrest in Yugoslavia. And they come out with some little quick phrase like, what they're having is diminished expectations too soon arisen once their freedom was experienced almost overnight. And you go, wait a minute, I like that. And then you repeat it. And I don't mean just on the basis of trying to show off to somebody. You repeat on the basis, which is one thing. That's fairly innocuous, by the way, just trying to show off with a line you've plucked out of the Wall Street Journal this afternoon like you just thought about it. That's the kind of fodder for a comedian or some smart ass to say, well, yeah, that's just like humans. They don't think. They don't think before they talk. The guy's trying to, he heard people talking about the political situation around the Adriatics, and he just happened to know where the Adriatic is because he saw a map for the first time in his life today in a Time magazine. He says, yes. And he suddenly gives a half-assed quote